Hello, everyone. My name is Jeannie Shop, and I come to you from Pathways Towards Literacy, and I am the editor and a co-author of the upcoming book, Reading Isn't Optional, Fulfilling the Promise of Literacy for Secondary Students. And I'm with two of the amazing contributing authors of the text, Nancy Hennessy and Julie Salamone, and I'm so excited for them to share with you about their work in secondary literacy and why this chapter is so important. So go ahead, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Jean. We greatly appreciated the opportunity to participate along this journey with you and to address such an important topic. I'll just share a little bit about myself, and then my colleague and good friend will share a little bit about herself as well. I worked in public school for many, many years, originally in regular education, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. And then I ended up as a special education teacher in middle school. And that was the beginning of my journey really with adolescence. From there, I went to the high school district where I was in administration, and eventually I was in central office as the director of professional development for all of the teachers. I've been in this space for a while. And then, of course, I now work as a literacy consultant and have worked both in public and private settings as such, lots and lots of teacher training, and come to this with a background certainly in word recognition, which is critical. All right. Spent many years involved with the International Dyslexia Association. But of course, most recently, my focus has been comprehension and lots of writing about that, lots of talking about it, and so on, with a focus across the grades, but particularly in this chapter, thinking about the adolescent. Yeah.
Well, and I'm just going to say I totally enjoyed in your book Comprehension Blueprint and read it cover to cover, and then of course Julia joined you with the practical tools, which just really are incredible. So thank you for that amazing piece of work that's such a contribution to the field in this space of comprehension. Because of course in secondary it's like all about comprehension. So Julia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Mm.
So I started off my teaching career in Philadelphia. I worked for both the school district and the charter school system. And I started off in the middle school. So I was teaching in grades 6 through 8. And I first really encountered the realities of adolescent struggling readers when it became clear that many of my students didn't have the foundational skills needed to engage with the complex text that they were reading. I think this is where it sparked my interest in learning more about ways to help them learn how to read. And that's how I found out about my Wilson certification. So I pursued that through AIM Academy, and I ended up teaching actually in their lower school. And that's where I met Nancy. And I think Nancy and I really connected over our love of all things reading comprehension. We did some collaboration and work around coaching and supporting teachers at AIM. And then that experience sort of helped shift my lens a little bit to thinking about not just student instruction and working with kids, but also how to work with teachers. So I think that, teachers are probably the most amazing profession. I absolutely love teachers and I think that they contribute so much. So I thought about ways that how can we give them the tools and the knowledge that they need to really support all readers. And currently, I'm working as an instructional specialist at the Haverford School for Boys, and I work in grades 9 through 12. And so I do a lot of this work there, partnering with faculty to really strengthen student learning in the disciplines, thinking about comprehension and writing instruction.
Well, and I met you through AIM too. You were a wonderful teacher that I learned from when I got involved with AIM and did things on them virtually as well. So yes, and what I love about your duo, right? Your dynamic duo of you two. You got the work of Nancy and the research and being in the field for, and you're like boots on the ground, like integrating the real work in real time, right? That's why you're such a great duo. And so your title of your chapter is all about content and discipline literacy. So tell us what do people really need to know about this chapter in the area of secondary literacy?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that has struck me over the years is the fact that we kind of neglected comprehension. I very much considered myself a kind of a decoding queen because of my involvement with the International Dyslexia Association and my background both in Wilson and letters and so on. But it was really my experience as one of those original letters trainers that brought me to understanding that comprehension really hadn't received the attention that it deserved. It's absolutely necessary that our kids learn how to read words. I'm still about, decoding and word recognition, but what's the point if in fact they can't understand what they're reading? So for me, this chapter and anything that I do that relates to comprehension has to do with the fact that if we think about the goal of reading proficiency, it's learning. Reading and writing are tools for learning, for acquiring knowledge that we can use both in school and in life. And so the chapter really addresses comprehension, and it takes it a little bit further. It takes it from the point of view of what I would consider foundational comprehension capabilities and skills to those that are necessary to deal with the specialized features of text that students begin to encounter in middle school and then certainly have to work with in high school. So that chapter is really all about how do we build, all right, the foundational skills that are necessary, the processes, the knowledge base that's necessary to construct meaning, all right, in content area text, the text that we typically think of, the narrative and expository text that we're using maybe K5 or 6. How do we build that and then work with our students to be able to work with more advanced text and structures? Yeah. So Julia?
So Julia, what do teachers do? Like, how do they teach comprehension in the content areas and in their disciplines?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. Thinking about this chapter, the way we try to approach it is that content literacy, content area literacy, and disciplinary literacy, they operate across like a continuum. So oftentimes, you might think of them as competing approaches, but they're not. So content literacy, you're starting off providing students with those general strategies to access and understand information. Disciplinary literacy builds upon this foundation and really helps students learn and helps teachers teach about how experts in specific fields read and write and how they use evidence. For someone who, getting into that field, it's so fascinating when you think about a scientist or a physicist and how they read versus how someone who is a historian might, right? And I think as students begin to develop knowledge and proficiency with this, right, instruction can kind of shift from these broad comprehension supports to more specialized disciplinary practices. So I think really not thinking about it as a one or another kind of approach, but like how can we use content area literacy sort of as a pathway, as this continuum, and then bringing in the disciplinary literacy as students progress and move through.
Fantastic. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking like this is all about improving our reading outcomes for our secondary students, right? Because the data it shows that we are graduating too many children that just do not read and write at the grade level, let alone the basic level. So why is this chapter so critical to improving those reading outcomes?
Well, when I think about this, Jean, I think about it from the perspective of, we've had this really important emphasis on early intervention and the building of these foundational skills in terms of word recognition early on. But the reality is when our students move through the grades, they also have to work with the academic language of text, all right? And so the building of these processes and skills that allow for the creation of the product, the mental model, that outcome that we want, is dependent upon building a foundation and then thinking through, all right, now they have a history text in front of them. They have a science text in front of them, and they have something in their English class. And they really need to understand kind of basic comprehension capability or have that in place in order to deal with the more sophisticated texts that they're going to meet. I really think the adolescents have been neglected. We're finally paying attention, I think, to adolescents, thanks to your book and the work of many others. I just want to be certain that we don't forget about the comprehension aspect, that while we're working with word recognition, we're giving these students access to text that are academically challenging. I mean, I spoke earlier to the fact that I was a special ed middle school teacher. All right. Eventually, I ended up in the regional high school district where those students went. All right. And I could see, because we were not focused enough on these comprehension capabilities, that when they went to the high school, while academically capable, they weren't always able to access the curriculum in those academic texts and academic courses because they hadn't built the language capabilities that they needed. Yeah.
I would just add too that I think that this idea that we often assume that by middle and high school students have already sort of learned to read, right? But this idea that I think this explicit, where when educators are explicitly teaching kids how to read and analyze and work with the different texts, both first starting in content area and then within the disciplines, they're really that explicit instruction is critical, right? I think about Dr. Archer and this idea that we cannot commit a suicide with adolescents and secondary readers, because we know that many of them, they have to be explicitly taught how to work with these texts. So I think this idea that we can help them independently navigate, but they need scaffolded support, they need modeling, they need practice, they need all of those components to be successful with this. So this idea that, we don't just assume that the learners come equipped with these skills, but really provide the instruction and the opportunities for practice so that they can then learn how to do this on their own.
I
And I
think
love
that,
how you're talking about because that idea of instruction, explicit
yes,
instruction
yes,
and language comprehension. Because
yes,
to your point, Nancy, being a middle school reading interventionist and working on those foundational skills, but we know, right? Um, Reading is parasitic on language, right? We know that, but we also have to equip teachers to how to teach it, and they're not
right.
secondary teachers are trained in literature, but not literacy and how to explicitly teach it. And I think what's so powerful about your chapters in that work that I did in my building, like I always felt as an English language arts teacher, like we were the ones carrying, the weight. But if we really want to improve outcomes, right? Everybody's got to be all in, all content teachers, all disciplines, all in, teach an explicit language comprehension for our students. So that's why I'm so grateful about this chapter. So, and a final thought, right? What do you hope is like some key takeaway, like from your chapters that you hope teachers can just take to the children?
Yeah. Well, I think from my perspective, I'm hoping that the chapter informs all teachers in middle and high school about the knowledge and skills that they have to have in order to teach their students well, so that they have this understanding of how do you go about building the language skills, the cognitive skills, the different knowledge sources, so that their students can deal with and work with the text that they have in front of them. I think that teachers, they all want their students to learn their content. And the reality is, how do they access the content? They access it through their reading capabilities and their writing proficiency, right? Those are the
Mhm.
tools that they have to have in place. So I don't necessarily want to say everyone is a reading teacher, but everyone is a reading teacher. Everyone is a writing teacher. And thinking through, how does this apply to your specific content area, I think is particularly critical. And I don't think that's a knowledge base that most teachers receive. So we're hopeful that we're giving them a taste of that.
That's wonderful. Julia?
Yeah, no, I think you both hit on it. This idea that helping secondary educators realize that adolescent literacy, it's our collective responsibility, right? It's not just on the ELA teacher or the special ed teacher, but it's all of us coming together. And I think really kind of grounded in this idea that literacy is a gateway to knowledge. It's a gateway to opportunity and it's a gateway to agency and just how critical that is. So I think if we can kind of get behind that and really think about that shared goal, and understanding that, again, we can collectively work together. I think the other thing, it's not something we never want to add more to teachers' plates, but we always want to kind of clarify how literacy literacy lives within the disciplines, right, in different ways. And when we think about, the ways that we can embrace and schools can embrace literacy from foundational skills all the way up through that continuum of disciplinary expertise, we really are creating more equity, I think, for our students in their ability to access complex texts, to really think critically, and like kind of the big so what, right? To engage meaningfully with the world.
Yeah,
Well,
nicely done.
nicely said. And way to wrap it up. This brief little conversation, and I'm so excited to get this book out and get into the hands of people. And I'm so incredibly grateful for both of you and your contributions to the field and contribution to this book that hopefully will raise the lid for our students and for our students, because we know reading isn't optional.
And learning is the work for all of us. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Okay.